Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, remember when Donald Trump issued a bunch of unconstitutional executive orders punishing law firms that displeased him? And don't take my word for it that these executive orders were unconstitutional. Every court, every judge that handled one of those cases ruled that those executive orders were unconstitutional. But friends, here's the thing. Those executive orders not only violated the U.S. Constitution, they also violated state extortion laws. Well, now, a terrific pro-democracy, pro-rule of law nonprofit, Free Speech for People, has done something about it. They sent letters which frankly read more like legal briefs. Letters like this one to state law enforcement officials in the states where these law firms operate. These law firms that were extorted by Donald Trump, urging state law enforcement authorities to investigate Donald Trump for the crime of extortion. I recently sat down with Courtney Hostetler. Courtney is the legal director for Free Speech for People, and we talked about this project, this undertaking, and the many efforts her organization is involved in to, in a very real sense, protect we the people against an abusive and, yes, criminal President of the United States. Here's my recent conversation with Courtney Hostetler of Free Speech for People. All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of Justice Matters One-on-One. I'm really excited today to have with me Courtney Hostetler. She is the legal director for a really terrific nonprofit organization called Free Speech for People. They have been fighting for democracy. They've been fighting for all of our rights. They've been fighting against governmental corruption for a very long time now. And I'm really excited to ask Courtney about some of the projects and the campaigns that they're currently involved in. So, Courtney, thanks for joining us here on Justice Matters One-on-One.
Thank you so much for having me. I really am looking forward to talking with you about some of our projects.
Now, can you tell our viewers first when and why Free Speech for People was created? I've talked to John Boniface about it, and it's a really interesting backstory. So can you share with us the origin of Free Speech for People?
Absolutely. Well, John, as you know, is our brilliant co-founder, has been at Free Speech for People since the beginning, which was the day of the Citizens United decision, which was a massive sea change in the way that our country looks at speech, at personhood, at political spending. What that decision did was say that corporations are people for the purpose of political spending, and that money is speech when it comes to political spending. And what that really has done is erode the idea of free speech for people, thus the name. And I think that really speaks to what we have seen since that decision. So Free Speech for People began as an organization looking to change that, to get rid of that decision through a constitutional amendment. That is part of a broader goal of Free Speech for People to get money out of politics, to end corruption in our political system, to really bring the idea back to democracy being something that is for the people, by the people. And to really, that's not just an idea that should exist on some, oh, that's a nice sentiment, right? That's not a throw pillow. That should be a fundamental concern of how our country operates. And I think what we've seen in the last 15 years, and never more so than the last 6 months, is that we've vastly moved away from that our country is becoming beholden to corporations who are not people, to billionaires who have vast resources, often obtained at the expense of people and workers, and deregulation, and bringing it back to our democracy working for people, by people, with the kind of protections in place that we've lost. That's a long answer, but that's really where we started and how we got to where we are.
Yeah, and I love and will probably steal at some point your observation that, it's more than just a cute phrase on a throw pillow. What a great way to put it. So I want to talk to you, and I'm frankly most excited to talk with you about the current endeavor that you all have launched. You have sent formal requests to several attorneys general for the states, and I think state prosecutors as well, and you are urging them to launch criminal investigations of Donald Trump for extortion. The reason I'm so looking forward to hearing about that effort is because, I was a federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. for decades, which means I was both a federal prosecutor and a local prosecutor for the District of Columbia. So anytime I hear about efforts like the one Free Speech for People is engaged in to try to encourage the states to hold Donald Trump accountable for some of these, what look to this old prosecutor like obvious crimes, I get very excited. So can you tell us about that effort you're involved in?
Absolutely. And I think you did a great job of summarizing why we're doing this. So the background is several months ago, Donald Trump started issuing these executive orders that targeted law firms in a very punitive way. These were about sanctioning these law firms for taking positions and representing clients that Donald Trump personally didn't like, for hiring attorneys that Donald Trump personally didn't like, and for using hiring practices that Donald Trump doesn't like. And they were very targeted and very illegal, right? So some of the things that these executive orders did was to kick every attorney who works at these firms out of government offices. A lot of these law firms represent people who have administrative complaints, who have cases against the government. They have to be there. They ended government contracts with these law firms. They got rid of the security clearances of people at these law firms. These are law firms that have long-standing relationships with agencies, federal agencies in D.C. and agency locations across the country. It really crippled their ability to do work. It meant that clients really couldn't choose these law firms if they had any sort of contract issue or administrative complaint with the government. And then the other thing that the EOs did, the executive orders did, was to go after the clients themselves, right? And so what they said is anybody who is contracting with the government needs to disclose if they have business with these law firms, even if it's business unrelated to the government contracts. And so it makes it quite frightening for these government contractors. And so what are they going to do? They're going to end their own business with these law firms because they can't risk losing their government contracts. All of this is illegal. Some of the law firms fought it and won early and ongoing victories, right? They won preliminary injunctions. They've won at other stages. These lawsuits are ongoing, but it's looking very favorable for the law firms that are defending their right to choose their clients, to hire their own attorneys, to participate in a robust manner in our judicial system.
And if I could interject, I don't want to interrupt you, but while we're on the law firms that fought and won, right? They didn't just give their lunch money to the bully without a fight. They went into court in my old stomping grounds, Washington, D.C., and all four cases, they won hands down. Absolutely. And they won in front of judges who were Republican appointees. I hate that we have to include that in our discussion, but we do these days. Judge John Bates, Judge Richard Leon. And so the law firms that stood up for themselves and their own rights and refused to be victims, they won easily. Absolutely. In court. But then I know you're about to move on to the law firms that opted not to fight.
Well, your point, though, I'm really glad you made that interjection because these wins were incredibly important. And I urge anyone listening who's interested to go read those decisions, as you mentioned, by a wide group of judges who have weighed in on the side of our judicial system, right? It's not even just on the side of the law firms who are fighting it, but on the side of what makes our adversarial system work. And it is not going to work if they are beholden to presidents who are abusing their power and sanctioning them for existing, right? And so there's some great opinions out there and certainly worth reading. But as you mentioned, the reason we wrote these letters is several law firms, including huge law firms that are incredibly influential, immediately folded, right? What they did is they went to Trump, they negotiated, and they gave up essentially their independence. And they gave what they offered is said, okay, get rid of these sanctions and we will give you free legal services at some later date to be determined, right? Which is quite, they didn't even know what they were agreeing to. But, millions and millions of dollars in free legal services to cases and clients of Trump's choosing. We're also seeing a silencing of these firms, both because now they have fewer resources to do pro bono work, but it's been very clear that if they choose their own pro bono clients, then they're going to be targeted. So there's this very specific, we're going to give you our money and our resources and our time, that type of extortion, but also that self-censorship, extortive piece of it. Some of the firms were already under executive orders. Trump, as soon as these agreements were reached, rescinded the order. Others were just under threat of executive order, and they basically made their agreements with Trump, gave away their money, their resources to clients' issues unknown to them, just of Trump's choosing at some future time. And that's extortion, right? Yeah. That is, I am going to threaten you. I'm going to take away your clients. I'm going to subject you to a punitive executive order, or some of them, he also ordered agencies to conduct these invasive investigations for no reason. Essentially, again, he doesn't like their hiring practices. They wanted to avoid that. And so they paid him.
And extortion is a fancy word, but it's really nothing more than using threats or force or violence to extract the thing of value from another person or organization to which you are not lawfully entitled. So I love when I hear you say that's extortion, because that's the way this whole prosecutor sees it as well.
And every state that we've looked into, it is illegal to extort someone. They might have different names, different states call it different things, but that fundamental idea is you can't threaten somebody and get money to take away the threat. That's illegal, that's extortion. And so what we are asking for is for these states to step up and investigate these. This is a crime, right? What we know, and hopefully a robust investigation by prosecutors will turn up much more than we can see on the surface, but even what is publicly known looks a lot like extortion. And this is the sort of thing where if he weren't a sitting president, then he and his advisors and Boris Epstein would absolutely be on the hook for some sort of criminal investigation. The fact that they're powerful should make states more concerned about protecting their citizens from extortion, not less concerned, right? We shouldn't be in a position where power and politics makes you immune and allows you to, make these extortive threats to the citizens of New York, of Pennsylvania, of California, of Massachusetts.
With that enhanced power of these people should come enhanced responsibility and accountability. Now, we know that the current Department of Justice under Pam Bondi's, I'm going to put the word leadership in air quotes, they're not going to do anything. So it looks like that's why Free Speech for People turned to the states. And so what did you actually do to encourage the states to address this?
Well, in these letters, these were not one-line letters. We really tried to lay out why this was important, not just the facts, but to provide the legal context and also to explain why these states have the authority to carry out these criminal investigations, right? Trump does not have immunity for extortion. Extortion is not an official act, right? These crimes are not official acts for which he might have immunity. And states absolutely have the ability to investigate and, where appropriate, prosecute crimes that are committed in their states against their citizens, like extortion. And it's something that the states really have to do, because we have seen a capturing of our Department of Justice, a capturing of the FBI. We've seen a cleaning of their cleaning house of all these career public servants who have worked sometimes for decades in the FBI, in the DOJ, in a nonpartisan manner. They don't bring their politics to the table. They do their job. They've been cleaned out, right? They've been cleaned out. They've been targeted individually. They've been cleaned out by the dozens, potentially the hundreds. The DOJ has been weaponized to serve as Trump's personal attack dog. And unfortunately, that means we can't rely on the DOJ to do what it needs to do to prosecute the corruption and the crimes that it is seeing from our highest officials. But our founders, they were pretty smart. They understood that tyranny was somebody was going to try to bring tyranny into our country. They understood that there was a risk of people like Trump. They would not have been surprised that Trump exists. I think where they would be surprised at the way in which our Congress is rolling over and allowing Trump to do what he's done. I think that would surprise them. But there's a reason we have a system with a federal government in states. And we've seen this throughout history, where sometimes it is the federal government protecting the rights of the people, protecting people from the violence and encroaching tyranny of state governments. But we have also seen state governments stand up against tyranny from the federal government. And that is what we're seeing now. So we do need the states and the local governments to stand up for their residents, for their communities. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing some fantastic movement from people who are protecting their immigrant communities, who are defending their streets against, say, the militarization of their National Guard. We saw the governor do that in California. We are seeing local level, state level, but what we're not seeing is the prosecutors step up for these corrupt criminal acts. And they do have the power to do that. And frankly, the obligation to do that. If somebody came to them with these facts and it was just somebody else, it was Mr. Jones, this would absolutely warrant an investigation. They have an obligation to investigate if somebody is being extorted. The prosecutors need, I think they have the authority and the obligation to protect our country and to protect their citizens. I mean, that's what they do. That's what you did.
To your earlier point, we are seeing states step up in, crimes that seem predominantly federal, like Donald Trump's attempt to steal the 2020 election. There are criminal prosecutions up and running still in Georgia, in Arizona, in Michigan, in Wisconsin. So they are enforcing state law in that arena. Here's the $64,000 question. What, if any, kind of feedback have you gotten from the state attorneys general or state prosecutors?
We unfortunately haven't gotten much. A couple of the responses we've gotten are a little bit of hot potato over who has responsibility to investigate. We're trying to make sure that our letters are going to the right people. We send them to new people if it's brought to our attention that we should do that. And we're hoping that this is the opening moment, right? Sometimes it takes a while to get the wheels of justice moving. It would have been great to get an email response saying, we're on it. But we also realize that, this is unfortunately in this time, given the kind of attack that Trump is leading against democracy and against institutions, why this would be a big ask. We think that the prosecutors and the investigators are up to the task. They need to be up to the task. Our democracy depends on it, but it might take a little time. So we're going to, we sent the letters, we'll stay in touch. We hope that, people who are interested in this will follow up with the DAs we've reached out to as well, if they live in these areas, and say, look, you represent us. These law firms are operating in my communities. It's our local pro bono. It's our local organizations that are losing their pro bono support when they've always gotten it, right? So hearing from more people might be helpful, and we'll just keep at it. We'll keep at it till somebody steps up and says, "Yeah, we're looking into this."
Good. And I think the reality is there is a fear factor. I mean, Donald Trump has an insatiable appetite for revenge. He has been promising to prosecute everybody from Hillary Clinton starting 10 years ago to most recently he has added, Obama and John Brennan and James Comey and so many others. What I tell people all the time, including when I talk to people who are the subject of his revenge and his unlawful executive orders, like Miles Taylor, for example, who Donald Trump falsely accused of committing treason, a crime punishable by death. I say, he has forever promised to prosecute people, and he has prosecuted exactly 0 of those people. Why? Because those people committed no crimes, so you're going to be hard-pressed to obtain a federal indictment, but on the off chance you do, I believe that federal judges will cram vindictive prosecutions down the throat of the DOJ lawyer who is unethical enough to try to bring it to federal court. But the fear factor is there. The fear factor is real. But, if you signed up to be a prosecutor, an attorney general, a law enforcement official, you've got to push through the fear and do the right thing. And I couldn't agree more with your sentiments that state laws were violated and state prosecutorial authorities need to address this. They have to. So we're going to be 100% behind your efforts to keep pushing this rock up the hill. But let me shift focus a little bit. I know you also have sort of a letter signing campaign underway to impeach and remove Donald Trump. I know that you have a crimes tracker, an impeachable offenses tracker. So can you tell us a little bit about that ongoing effort?
Sure. And, I wish we could say that our tracker was being updated by the minute. We're a small organization. That's more than what we can do. Although we do think that in this moment where literally Trump is attempting to change history, right? There's the new order at the Smithsonian that he's getting rid of what he doesn't like. Keeping record of everything he's done is a critical endeavor for everybody involved in this process to protect our democracy, because facts matter and truth matters. So what we are doing is, if you look at our Impeach Trump Again website, we keep a list of the impeachable offenses. And under these, unfortunately, are numerous facts that support why this is a ground for which he should be impeached. For example, usurping the power of the states and local governments, usurping the power of Congress, abusing emergency powers, militarizing our cities and states without any grounding and against federal authority and the acceptance of the states, and of course, Washington, D.C. itself. Bombing Iran, which is something that would have required congressional approval, and which he didn't get, the undermining of people's First Amendment rights, the attack on the press, the erosion of our ability to protest, the use of ICE and federal military forces against peaceful protesters. Again, not only against peaceful protesters, but at the without the support of the governors in which he's operating. Right, governors are saying, "I want to protect my people. They're not doing anything wrong. Protect our protesters." He's attacking the press. He's attacking people's rights to speak. He's going after people who engage in speech he doesn't like. We see him going after the students who engage in pro-Palestinian speech. We're seeing the unlawful firing, as we talked about early, the weaponization of the FBI and the DOJ. I'm a long answer, but again, I connect you to our website where we list this out, because it's important to understand it isn't just that he's doing things that make us uncomfortable or that he's doing things that are bad, because right now I think we all feel quite powerless, right? Because we're seeing just headline after headline after headline of things that he is doing that hurt people, that hurt our immigrant communities, that hurt our right to speak, that make us afraid to live in our own cities. And we feel helpless, but we are not helpless. The impeachment power exists. We have representatives that we could be calling and saying, why aren't you impeaching him? This is an abuse of power. This is precisely the kind of assault on our democracy that our founders were worried about. It is why we empowered Congress with the ability to impeach a sitting president. This is why it's fascinating to look at the way our founders talked about the risk of tyranny, about the possibility that somebody like Trump would come into play. And they put upon Congress an obligation to act. We are not helpless. Our representatives are not helpless. They like to act like they're helpless, but they're not. And we need to remember that there are protections in our system. There's protections in our Constitution, and we should be using those. And it's not about being vindictive about one party or another. It is about protecting our democracy and ensuring that the people that our democracy exists for are protected and those rights are protected. And so we have to track it. We have to record it, but we also have to be demanding that our representatives act. So we have this petition, but this petition hopefully is also about bringing this to the attention of the people who should be filing articles of impeachment, who should be voting to impeach. It should not be about whether or not you're in the same party. We're so far beyond that.
And I think the petition, is it approaching 1 million signatures at this point?
Very close to 1 million. People care. People are worried.
It's not just a petition. I mean, pressure bursts pipes, and those kind of campaigns put pressure on elected officials who, let's face it, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you're always interested in how you're going to fare in your next election. Are you going to get reelected? And when I hear you list that litany of high crimes and misdemeanors, governmental abuse of office and abuse of power. It's like an impeachable offense palooza, and it's so staggering when I hear it all put together like that. And you probably just scratched the surface, but when we realized that one of his first acts in office the second time around was to sign an executive order trying to revoke the constitutional guarantee of birthright citizenship, and a judge appointed by a president no less than Ronald Reagan, Judge John Coffenauer, said, this is blatantly unconstitutional. This is not an instance where a president is signing something that's open for debate. Maybe he's taking some liberties with some precedent, thinking this is going to pass constitutional muster. That's not what he's doing. And I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but he is sitting in the Oval Office when he's not on the golf course, signing unlawful and unconstitutional executive order, one after another, knowing full well it's unlawful and unconstitutional. And all of this, it feels like, he is engaged in impeachable conduct each and every day of his presidency. And I agree with you. We have to keep the pressure on our elected officials in every way we can, or else, we just may lose our republic. So let me ask this. Where can people find you? How can people support the great work that Free Speech for People is doing?
Well, we're at freespeechforpeople.org. So that's a good place to start. We also have our impeachtrumpagain.org website, where we talk about these grounds that I discussed and all the ones that I missed, because there are so many. So those are two great places to start. And I would really just urge the folks who care about this, I think everyone who's listening in, to really keep themselves as up to speed as possible with what's happening, but also with what they can do, because it is very easy in this moment to feel helpless. And that is also how democracies fall. There are still paths forward, including those pressure burst pipe, as you were saying. So start with our websites, but don't start there. Don't stop there, right? You sign our petitions, call your representatives, keep yourselves informed about what's happening and what you can do about it, how you can protect our most vulnerable communities who are being targeted by these blatantly unconstitutional and impeachable offenses. And, our democracy is still here. And remember, we have all these different points. We have prosecutors at the state level. We have governors. We have, when our democracy starts crumbling someplace, we do need to demand everybody else have the gumption and the courage to stand up against somebody frightening. Dictators are frightening. Tyrants are frightening. But the powerful need to stand up to them. I mean, that's why it's so depressing when you see these massive institutions, these incredibly well-funded universities and law firms fold. Because you're the most powerful, right? That they have the most ability to fight. And when they crumble, they are essentially leaving the work to our most vulnerable. And let's not be the ones to do that, right?
And when the institutions, the universities, the law firms bend a knee to an aspiring dictator, that endangers us all, because
Absolutely.
It emboldens him to
Absolutely.
go even harder against others and continue his, extortion, his abuse. And so let me thank you, Courtney, for not only being here with us today on Justice Matters One-on-One, but for being in this fight for the people. You, John, and the whole Free Speech for People organization are doing such great work. I will put in the description of this video those links that you mentioned so people can follow up, find you, support your efforts, because I often say it is organizations like this, Free Speech for People, and so many others, that are out there fighting for our rights, fighting for our democracy, even though we're not paying them, we're not retaining them as lawyers. They're out there fighting for us every day, so we really need to reach out and support them. So again, thank you for your efforts, and thank you for being here today on Justice Matters One-on-One.
Thank you so much. It's been great being here, and thank you for everything you do.